So we are going to start today actually from something I painted. I painted it in gouache when I was binge watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And right now it's a TIFF, but if it was a JPEG, we would do the same process. But either way, it's made of pixels. It's a bitmap image. So if we zoomed in on this, it would get blurrier. We can turn this into vectors using Illustrator's auto trace. So we need to have this selected to be able to use auto trace or image trace. I think it might have used to be called auto trace, so I might call it that sometimes, but image trace. And we can find image trace up here on the top, right? I've already switched from essentials to layout, which might happen when you launch it. And we can access it up here, image trace. And if we click on this little down arrow next to image trace, we'll get some of these presets. If we just click it, it's just going to do the default thing, which might not be what we want. We especially want it to deal with some colors. So I'm going to choose 16 colors because I can reduce the number of colors later. Okay. So image trace can take a while. So it was subtle, but it did get a lot smoother and crisper. And now if we zoom in, you can see it doesn't get blurry. It has these kind of hard lines because it's made of vectors now. We still can't edit it with the white selection tool just yet. And there's actually more kind of finessing we can do with the image trace. So up here on the panel, like up at the top, there's a little button now when I have this thing selected. And I can hit that to get the image trace panel. And this guy, it might show up like this with advanced folded. In here, we can choose from other presets, right? So I could switch it to another preset. Or I could lower or raise the amount of colors, and it would retrace it. I can also, under advanced, tell it to be smoother or tighter to the fit of your drawing. So maybe I want it to keep a little bit less of this kind of gritty texture that it gets along some of my lines. Maybe I would like to try to get rid of some of that by telling it to be a bit smoother. I'm first going to just shut off preview. It's not the end of the world if you don't shut off preview, but if you don't, then every time you make an adjustment, it will retrace it, and that's annoying. So I'm going to lower the paths, right? And lower paths means that it fits a little bit looser to its original shape. And same thing for corners. Less corners means it's looser. And then noise, if we raise noise to 100 pixels, that means that anything that is any sort of graininess that's under 100 pixels, like maybe there's a piece of dust in your scan, it would ignore that. It wouldn't try to make a circle for it or whatever. So now I'm going to hit trace and we can compare. Takes a little bit. So this is just image trace. So I'm going to do it again in a little bit with an image. So it was, again, pretty subtle, but it did get a lot smoother. And this means that it's going to have less handles and anchor points. And the less handles and anchor points it has, the easier it is to edit if we wanted to do some fine tuning. Okay, so that looks good. And now I'm going to hit expand, and it's going to kind of leave this image trace world and become editable vectors. And we can see all of the individual vector lines. And it does add some variance in the white, right? The white was maybe like dirty or raised where the paint was, so there's a little bit of a variance, but that'll be okay. We can get rid of it. Right now it's grouped though. After you hit expand, you also have to ungroup. It's a little bit like Pathfinder, how after you group or after you divide, you have to ungroup. So ungroup. A lot of those higher end functions, it ends up grouped. So now I want to remove the white background of it so I can have access to just my individual motifs to play with and maybe put it on a different color background. So I am going to grab my magic wand tool. Just like in Photoshop, the magic wand tool grabs stuff that's similar colored. So if I click the white background, it'll pick all of the white in the page. And if I hit delete, it'll get rid of it all, and now I'm just left with my images. You can change the tolerance on the magic wand tool by double clicking on the tool there. And that's how you access that tolerance, like how much it picks up on either side of the white that you click on. But I also was really just doodling when I drew these. So I drew them kind of close together. If I was really thinking ahead to the fact that I might use these as textile design motifs, I would probably have spread them out or put them on different pages because they're a little bit hard to grab. Like if I tried to grab the hand or the pumpkin, I like wouldn't quite be able to by dragging a box around it. And if I just click on it, it's only gonna pick like one piece of it. So instead, I'm going to use the lasso tool, which I still wish they had a polygonal lasso tool because I have a hard time holding the mouse button down all the way around these shapes sometimes. But you can draw all the way around them and pick them out that way. It's the white selection tool though, so it's down to like actual pixels. So if I accidentally go on to one of the other shapes, I'm gonna pick up their little anchor points, not pixels, but anchor points. So then I can just switch to the black selection tool and I can move it around as long as I'm clicking on some of the black, right? If I clicked on the white, it wouldn't move it because there's nothing there.
Would it be easier to group them?
Yes, that's exactly what I was about to say. You can right click and group them, yes. And that is probably the first thing I would do if I was really digging into this as a textile design. I would probably like go around all of these and group them. I guess you can group them just like that without even switching to the black selection tool. I wasn't sure if you had to switch tools. But, so I'm just gonna grab a few of these. Now for your conversational prints, you aren't allowed to do straight repeats. So I'm going to review doing half drops and single, half drops and bricks. Okay. Do you guys have questions so far? Okay.
Last question.
Yes.
So as far as presenting it next week, do we have to do that PowerPoint thing again?
No.
Then how are we going to present it?
You're going to print them.
Do we always have to print them?
I guess you guys don't have.
just because it's very expensive.
You don't have to print them glossy. How's that?
Okay, so I actually did print mine glossy today just because it took more time than I was going to take up too much of my class time. But yeah, I was wondering about that because when I went last then and found out it's going to cost like $40 or something, it seems.
Yeah. I'll talk to Meg about or Sandra about what they expect at the portfolio review, I guess. But
Since the portfolio reviews, they're usually in sleeves, and if you mount your croissant paper on Bristol, people downstairs said that they've never seen second-year fashion design students print on Bristol.
oh, okay. All right, let's do it on croissant. I'm gonna email the other class then too.
I have another question. So as far as presenting it next week, so we're going to print out the conversational print and also the mood board.
Yeah,
So and we'll present it on the bulletin board.
yeah.
Wouldn't it be easier to just do a PowerPoint?
Yeah, but we're building your portfolios. And it's nice to see them on paper, you know, because you're really getting a feel for them. I also had to go through this, guys. We had to print. I spent so much money on my portfolio. I do use it though. I bring it to job interviews and I show them all my glorious prints. It's worth it.
I think I can speak for everyone is that we were very surprised. Like I wish we would have had a little bit more warning on how expensive.
I didn't realize it was going to be that expensive either, so I'm sorry.
And it's like most classes do that require us to use the tech facilities here, and it's just like
It was bunkers.
it's crazy expensive. And if we're gonna keep doing this for the next 3 years, I mean, I'm just like considering how much tuition is already super crazy expensive here. It seems like there's a problem with the system. Do you know what I mean? Just why is it that expensive?
Yeah. Okay, so I have made this little section of guys, and I actually want to reduce the number of colors in him. So I'm going to go over that too. So I want to select him. And then remember, this is the Recolor artwork tool up at the top. And so he has a bunch of duplicate colors in him, and we can eliminate those duplicates really easily with the Recolor artwork tool, and that's kind of my goal. I mean, this already has pretty few colors, actually, because I painted it that way, and gouache is really nice flat paint. So first off, I'm going to click on this little arrow next to each of the colors, and you can change it to exact, because we want it to be exactly the new color. And then we can take these duplicate colors and drag them upwards to their same equivalent. And now, like both of those shades of green, they will be displaying as the same shade of green, which is nice. It's subtle here, but that's the idea. And if you hit OK, then if we went and did it again just to see, we wouldn't have those duplicate greens anymore. Okay. So I'm going to put it on a background. And I'm going to try to make the background something like a round number, because that's my favorite way to make these. So orange is a little much. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Moodle, the conversational piece, the one where it's 9 boxes and
Yeah.
each one is different, is that how you wanted it to be presented?
Yes, what I'm going to add to that Moodle is that this middle row is optional, I think. Well, now that you're printing in the cheaper one, it's going to be so much less expensive, right?
For sure, so it's like 60 cents as opposed to
So then I think I think I would print the middle one then, if you're printing on the less expensive stuff.
What's the difference between the middle one and the whole thing?
So the middle one is this is the scale that it's printed at on your clothes, right? This guy, I would maybe want a 5-inch cat on my body, and that's the size that I'm printing it at, like 100% scale. And then this scale is so that we can evaluate it in our yardage or in and also evaluate the structure and like how good your repeat is, right? And then this one is probably the same scale as this guy, but you're showing your different colorways. And you're putting your 2 different colorways on the same page. I might make it clearer when I redo it here, because I didn't make my backgrounds different colors on these, I'm afraid it might be a little bit less clear than I wanted it to be. But these are your 3.
It looks so much cooler with white background, because all your little doodles, like, they're, more.
This is my 5-minute textile designs in class. All right, this is gonna be a really rambling YouTube video, but you guys, I'm still recording. All right. It's okay. Maybe I'll give you guys the one from earlier today. Maybe I won't put this on YouTube.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So you can choose anything flavorful?
Yes, your conversational's wide open. As long as you aren't making an abstract print. That's the idea. So it could be about firefighters or about, chocolate.
What do you mean as long as we're not making an abstract print?
Because your prints have to have something recognizable in them.
Oh, so I can't make okay.
Yeah.
All the requirements are on the syllabus, right?
Yeah, and they're all on Moodle now is like really the best place to look because I even wrote like more explanation about it. Okay, so reviewing how to make, let's do a half drop. I made sure my rectangle was easy numbers to divide in half and like easy whole numbers. And then I'm actually going to drag out my rulers, right? So how do we get rulers, guys? Does anyone remember? It's view, rulers, show rulers. That one's tricky. And then because, who knows? And then you can click and drag out from the rulers to get your guides. And if you have your square selected, you can choose the center of the square. And so if we're making a half drop, then anything that's on the right over here goes down it's gonna come back on the left over here. And I wanna make sure there's enough room for that. And I also prefer when I'm making these that if I'm making it easy on myself, things don't cross the center lines, right? I only have things like this guy is poking out halfway on the guideline. I would want to move that to make things easier on myself to be below the guideline. Okay, otherwise if they're like in the center, so if we took this one and we moved it to the left and then up 2 inches or whatever the math is going to work out to be, then it would be like halfway off of the top here and we would have to divide it again. That's all. So I'm just making it easier on myself because I'm only going to have to divide this one once. I'll try to do a very quick example of why it's difficult. So if we have this, and if we have a circle, oops. Or I'll make it asymmetrical. So this square we'll make it 1 by 1. I'll zoom way in. So we will divide this guy, right? So we're gonna do a half drop. So what's down here has to move up over there, and what's up in this quarter has to come across down to this quarter. So we can select them all, right, and choose divide. I didn't duplicate the background there because this is just an example. Ungroup, and then this guy we can right click, transform, move, and he has to move, we'll start off with 0 in both. He has to move to the left an inch and then up 0.5, or down 0.5, either way really. So -1, and then I have preview checked, which is very helpful because the vertical is backwards, like negative is down and positive is up. Sorry, 0.5. Because it's halfway. So see, it's hanging off the edge now, and I just have to do this extra step of dividing it again and ungrouping it. It's like not that hard. It's just, I think it's easier to try to kind of organize things so that they only leave this in quarters.
Okay.
But
I get what you mean now. I wasn't.
yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking. I want to delete my guides right now, so I unlocked them, and if they are locked, if they aren't locked, then you can select them by accident, and it gets very annoying, so I pretty much always lock my guides, so that's view guides, lock guides, and then you can't accidentally click them and move them around. So I might even make this a little bit bigger. So yeah, you should consider scale in your prints. Like you could make things really small and really large. Because we've auto traced this and turned into vectors, it's very easy. So yeah, so things are kind of only going off on the quarters right now. That matters a lot less on the bottom because the bottom is going to come straight across to the top. So this guy could go across in the middle. So that's going to come down like right here-ish. It's hard to think this through sometimes. Here-ish, and then this will come on like over there, and this will come on down there. All right, we'll try it out. So I'm going to duplicate the background so we still have a nice square later on. So edit copy, and then edit paste in front is the paste that puts it in exactly the right spot where it was. And we can select it and all of our shapes, which are so nicely grouped, and choose divide on our Pathfinder tools. Remember, they live under window. Yeah, and that divided them. And then they're still grouped until we right-click ungroup. Something I think I've probably neglected to mention is isolation mode, and like you've definitely run into it when you accidentally double-click on something and everything else grays out. So there is this option. Isolation mode allows you to edit groups without ungrouping them. So right now I could technically keep this grouped and then double click on it and work on it in here in isolation mode, and everything works the same. It's just that we can't edit anything that's grayed out. But I'm gonna just ungroup it. So that's what isolation mode is. You hit escape to get out of isolation mode. So I'm gonna zoom way in on this to make sure that I get as much of the shape as possible, right? And then this background is 3.5 by 4.5, so I actually didn't make that easy on myself, right? So it's 2.25 is half of that. And right-click, transform, move. Make sure both of these are 0 to start with, or that's easiest anyway. So it has to move to the left 3.5 inches. So that's negative 3.5, and then down 2.5. Right, 2.25, thank you. And positive is down. Yes, so there it is. So same thing for this guy. Right click, transform, move. And we can just make that positive negative there actually, and it moves up to the top. Same thing over here. So this one is coming down across from it, right? Because you're making an X with everything. In the half drop, you're making X's that touch the vertical sides, and in a brick, you're making X's that touch the tops, if that makes any sense. 3.5 inches right, 2.25 inches down. There it is. And the cat just comes 4.5 inches up. His legs do anyway. And since this shape didn't touch anything, it's ungrouped though. I can't quite get it out from under the cat. We'll leave it. It's my quick textile design. But now if we select it, and if our guides weren't locked, it would give us trouble. But you can select it and go to Object, Pattern, Make. And if we choose the half drop, it lines up. And we can hit done. So what I would do is I would grab a couple more of these motifs, you know, make a couple more textile designs. You know, like these ones. Yeah, hold on. And I could even select all. I could even select all of these and make and choose the Recolor artwork tool, right, to make sure that there are really only 8 colors, which again, we're just going to choose exact, and we could start just dragging them into each other. And you can drag more than one into them, right? So I can put all the greens in there. That's the idea anyway. And then we have a lot less. 1, 2.
So we should
But-
do that after we've already finished everything.
It's one of the options. I would probably be doing a combination of deciding when. I mean, you don't even have to work from a painted piece like I have. You might be working in Illustrator with the pen tool or pencil tool. There are benefits to working with the pen and pencil tool. I'm going to touch on that in a second. So, yeah, I mean, that is an option to make them, to do it all at the end and make sure there's only 8 across them. because then I was thinking how easy it would be to recolor this all at once, right? So I'm just gonna make another artboard for quick. And so let's say this is my first colorway. My second colorway and my third colorway can start off of my first colorway, but then just grabbing the Recolor artwork tool and going to edit instead, and you can link the harmony colors if you like, and then rotate it around, right? And really change up the feeling of it.
Did you say that the recolored ones are included in the 8 color limit? So if you already have like 6 there and then you're trying to recolor.
No. 8 colors across this colorway, and then you can have a totally new 8 colors on your second colorway.
Okay.
Good question. Yeah, please ask questions, guys. And I don't have to choose link, right? Like I could grab my gray here and give this a new colored background. And same thing down here, right? So this is how they all relate to each other, you know. Undo that link. I'll take that. Nice purple background. And I don't have to keep these blacks either, you know. I could change the black to a dark purple or whatnot. But then I could make 3 more artboards, right, for my next 3 prints. And draw, sorry, where's my rectangle tool? Hiding under my oval tool. So this could be the size that you, there it is, that you actually want it to be. So maybe I want it to be bigger than this. And you could debate with me about the necessity of the second one if you did want it to be at this scale on, like if you want it to be a small scale, maybe the second one where you show the small scale is maybe not necessary for your portfolio, but transform scale, right? And right now it's scaling the whole object, but that's not what we want. We want it to just transform the patterns. So I'm going to uncheck transform patterns. Sorry, I'm going to uncheck transform objects. And only transform patterns should be checked. And we can adjust here the scale. And maybe it's even like, it's not giant, it's just like that big. But this still is only really showing us like one whole repeat. So in the second, print, I've been taught always to have a tiny version also that shows at least 3 repeats, you know, so that we can really get a feel for how it would look like if it covered the whole dress, or if it, if you had printed yardage. Just then, by accident?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, it's negative, I think.
Yeah, I made it negative, which I didn't know existed, but this is a very sensitive scroll button. Yeah, so I went like all the way down, and now it's upside down. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. Interesting.
I mean, you could also you could like flip it. But for this last one, we would then do the other 2 colorways. So I would grab this and define it as a pattern. And the other secret way to define things as a pattern is to just drag them into the swatches.
Like, because you use the recolor thing?
You can also just go to edit, define pattern. It's literally, yeah. So we have to define these again because I recolored it. And we could go to object, pattern, make, and that would work. But literally the same thing is just like clicking on it and dragging it into the swatches menu. And now if we drag out a rectangle, we can apply that new colorway to it. Although it didn't make it a half drop automatically. In order to turn it into a half drop, we can always edit these patterns after we've defined them as patterns by double clicking on them in the swatch panel, and then we can adjust our pattern options. Just as an aside, you can always edit by double clicking. So the same thing for this guy is going to need to be defined as a brick by column. So if I draw my rectangles right next to each other without fiddling with settings in between them, like I just drew that one on the left and now I'm going to draw the one on the right, if I apply my my two different colorways to them, they should line up perfectly. Like if I've drawn the rectangles right next to each other and I apply the colorways, that's the way it works out. Sometimes it takes a little fiddling, and you might have to delete them and start over. Okay, can you see how I would continue going onwards to define these as patterns and make my next 6 artboards? Okay. So I just want to touch on why it might be better in some cases to draw with the pen tool as opposed to auto tracing. So make a new artboard. I'm going to bring it over here. And I'm also going to use this as like a pen tool, a quick pen tool review. So even if we are tracing an image that we've made, right? Auto trace will give it so many pixels. Like it can be overwhelming the amount of pixels that, or not pixels, anchor points that auto trace will give us. Like this shape alone has like 50 anchor points. So it would be hard for us to make nice, easy changes on that. So what instead we could do is trace it. I'm not going to trace that shape. I'm going to trace this one. But this one alone also has, you know, like 75 handles and anchor points. So instead, I'm going to throw this on its own layer, and I'm going to lock the layer like we do. This quick aside also about moving stuff from layer to layer. There is an option of right-clicking and going Arrange and choosing Send to Current Layer. But my favorite way to do it is have the object selected, and then this dot that's highlighted on the layer, right, that's blue, that represents everything on that layer that is selected, and you can click and drag that locked dot to whatever layer you want and see this change to red because now it's on the red layer, and we can lock it, move back to layer 1. So when we use the pen tool, we can use the least amount of anchor points possible, which is nice. So we can click and drag to make anchor points and handles, right? So, but before we really get into it, I want to make sure that my fill is empty and my stroke is black. So I'm just going to swap those. But my fill should have a Ghostbuster symbol through it because it's hard to draw when it's auto-filling the whole time. So let me step backwards for a second. Let's say I want this dot to be a corner, right? I can just click there and give it a corner. So this anchor point has no handles on it, so it's going to be a corner. And the line that's coming out from it right now is perfectly straight because we didn't give this anchor point, any handles. Now I want this to be a curved line, and I can make it into a curved line by clicking and dragging. So if we've decided to trace this shape in a clockwise order, we always want to be dragging in that clockwise direction, okay? So I am thinking about the line that I just made by clicking it and the line that's being drawn out from behind me, but I'm clicking and dragging forward, even though I am affecting the line that's behind me, okay? The pen tool is super important. So guys, this point here, how do I make this into a corner point? I'm drawing, I've got it, but it's a smooth line, right? And I want it to be a sharp line there. What keyboard button allows me to turn it into a corner smoothly? Corner. Alt? Yes, Alt, A-L-T. And it turns it into this little caret, and you can drag this in any direction, right? And we actually want it to come back almost on top of this shape, so we can place it out here almost on top of that handle that's affecting the other curve. So even though this line doesn't look like it's going to line up with my curve very well, I'm still going to click and drag a little bit further out than I would expect, right? I'm going to hit Command Z for a second. I could click here, and that would look like pretty close to my shape, ignoring this upper part. But instead I'm going to click down here because I want the least amount of anchor points possible. So I want to get as far as I can without using an anchor point. And we can use the handles to give it that structure it needs to get back across. And we can click to close the shape. We can always go back in and edit with the white selection tool, right? And we can change the length of our handles after that. When you're drawing it with the pen tool, the handles are locked to the same length unless you're making a corner, which can be annoying, but you can always go back in with the white selection tool and adjust. And this shape is much easier to work with and much easier to play around with than it would be as its auto-traced counterpart, right? Okay, so again, even if I go over this very quickly and don't make any corners, I'm just clicking and dragging, I'm never just clicking, and I'm just laying it down. I'm just trying to get it like close to where it is. I'm like, God, I just need to trace it so fast. So I traced it, and what I can do, let me get rid of its fill, is I can easily go back in with the white selection tool and adjust where the anchor points sit, adjust the handles. Maybe I really want this to be a corner and I accidentally made it smooth, right? I can convert it into a corner, again, with Alt. So with my white selection tool, also allows me to convert these handles to anchor points, okay? So if you guys are still having trouble with the pen tool, I would really recommend reviewing the Moodle, the worksheets that I put on Moodle, these drills, right, that we did in class. And you should be able to do these drills like without stopping, without making a mistake. It is important, especially for when we get to illustration, like of garments and making flats and everything. All of that is going to be more and more important. One more note about auto trace is that you could also, you can also use auto trace with pictures. So we did a husky last time. What? I'm not a robot. Why did that happen? So you can take images, although ideally, like this isn't what we're doing for this project, but this is something that auto trace can do. I'm just gonna copy it and paste it in here. With the image selected, we can choose from you know, a certain amount of colors. We'll try just 6 colors so it'll go faster. And it really breaks it down into more manageable shapes. And again, we could go to this panel, right? The little panel tool up there, and we could lower all of those and try to make it smoother. We could lower the amount of colors to a very specific number, you know, and it really can smooth it out. And then again, I can't edit it until I choose expand, and then ungroup, expand and ungroup. And then you could have a nice husky image. And if you edited this image enough, you know, maybe you started with these, but you like combined these shapes, right? You could use your Pathfinder tools to combine certain shapes into whole shapes, right? You could make it more graphic or smooth things out. It's just an option. But if you were using your own images, like if you took your own photographs and auto-traced them, I think that could be totally acceptable. But we really probably shouldn't just auto-trace other people's pictures for any project. Okay, questions?
So, do we need to create like 9 like this, or just in one?
9 ideally. But you can print in the 60-cent paper. What is it called, the cheaper paper?
The croissant. You have to say it with the accent though. Croissant.
I want to write it down for the other class, but so I'm sorry for making you spend money, I guess, earlier, but it is 9. But that 9 should only cost $6 then, which is more reasonable. And I think I've broken it down pretty well here, but I want to reiterate that you guys can always call me. My phone number is on Moodle and it's on the syllabus. You can text me and email me, and that's my job, is to help answer your questions and learn and help you guys learn. So I'm always around.
As far as texting, you want us to be, is it okay if we're informal, like, hey girl?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've had someone call me when I've been like a whiskey deep, and I still like walk them through Illustrator. So it can be, I'm there for you. Okay. Yeah, let me stop that recording anyway.